What happens when a laid-back Hollywood star known for charm and humor walks onto a daytime talk show and suddenly finds himself under a microscope he didn't expect? Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. Whoopi leans forward in her chair, smiling wide as the applause swells. All right, we're back, and our next guest needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway because that's my job. The audience laughs. He's an actor, producer, father of 3, and yes, apparently still worthy of the title people's sexiest man alive, whether he wants it or not. Please welcome Chris Hemsworth. The audience claps loudly as Chris walks out, waving with that easy grin, hugging Whoopi, nodding to Joy, Sunny, Sarah, and Alyssa as he takes his seat. He adjusts the mic, gives a small chuckle. That introduction gets longer every year. At some point, I'm just going to walk out and sit down without it. Joy smirks. Don't worry, Chris, we'll still clap. Chris laughs, relaxed, shoulders loose. That's all I ask. Whoopi gestures toward him. You've got a new film out, you've been everywhere lately, and I feel like every interview asks you about Thor, your body, or your kids. Chris nods. Yeah, that's pretty much the Holy Trinity. Sarah jumps in quickly. But this one's different, right? This one's more personal. Chris pauses just a beat. Yeah, I think so. It's closer to home, emotionally. Sunny tilts her head, eyes sharp but smiling. And you've also been really open lately about stepping back, about health, about privilege, about choices. Which, honestly, I appreciate. Chris nods again. Thank you. The conversation flows easily at first. They talk about Australia, about balancing family and work, about how fame feels different now than it did 10 years ago. The audience laughs when Chris jokes about being mistaken for Liam. He leans back comfortably, hands folded, posture open. Then Sunny straightens her notes. So I want to pivot just a little, she says, tone calm but deliberate. Because when someone like you talks about slowing down, stepping back, choosing balance, it resonates, but it also raises questions. Chris shifts slightly, still smiling. Okay, Sunny continues. You've talked about burnout. You've talked about needing space. But for a lot of people watching, stepping back isn't really an option. They don't have your resources, your wealth, your safety net. The audience murmurs lightly. Chris nods. Absolutely. I agree with that. Sunny doesn't pause. So when you talk about choosing peace, choosing family, choosing health, do you ever worry that it sounds out of touch? There's a noticeable change. Chris inhales, slower this time. His shoulders tense just a bit. I think about that a lot, he says carefully. And I try to be clear that I'm speaking from my own experience, not prescribing it to anyone else. Sunny presses. But intention and impact aren't always the same, right? A few audience members clap. Others stay quiet. Chris glances toward Whoopi, then back to Sunny. That's true. But I don't think acknowledging privilege means staying silent about struggles. Joy jumps in, waving a hand. Well, nobody's saying you can't have problems just because you're handsome and rich. Laughter breaks some of the tension. Chris smiles briefly. Thank you, Joy. That's comforting. Sunny keeps her eyes on him. I'm not saying you can't have struggles. I'm asking whether centering them publicly risks minimizing the realities of people who don't have options. Chris's jaw tightens slightly. He sits up straighter now. I don't think sharing my experience takes anything away from someone else's. Sunny raises an eyebrow. Even when your experience includes choices most people will never have. The room feels quieter. Chris shifts in his chair, fingers interlacing. I can only speak honestly, he says. If I start filtering everything through fear of being misunderstood, then what's the point of speaking at all? Sarah interjects, trying to soften it. I think what Sunny's asking is about responsibility. Like, when you have a huge platform. Chris nods quickly. Of course. And I take that seriously. Sunny leans forward now. Then let me ask it this way. When you talk about stepping away, about being overwhelmed, do you see how that can land as tone deaf to someone working 3 jobs, who can't afford therapy, who can't take a break? Chris exhales through his nose. The smile is gone now. I do see that, he says. But I also think there's value in saying burnout doesn't discriminate. Stress doesn't check your bank account before it hits. A ripple goes through the audience. Some nod. Some murmur. Sunny responds quickly. But access to solutions does. Chris looks directly at her. Yes. And that's a separate conversation that deserves attention. But I'm not going to pretend my mental health struggles didn't exist just because I was lucky in other ways. Whoopi steps in, voice firm. Hold on. We're not going to shame anybody for talking about their health. Applause breaks out. Sunny raises her hands slightly. I'm not shaming. I'm questioning the framing. Chris nods, but his posture is rigid now. And I'm saying the framing comes from honesty, not comparison. Joy looks between them. Okay, but Chris, you have to admit, when celebrities talk about slowing down, it can sound like a luxury problem. Chris's eyes flicker. I get why it sounds that way. But it didn't feel luxurious when I couldn't sleep, when I was anxious all the time, when I felt disconnected from my kids even while being physically present. The audience quiets again. Sunny softens her tone slightly, but doesn't back off. I hear that. I really do. But I think what frustrates people is that the conversation often stops at your pain, not at systemic issues. Chris pauses longer this time. His shoulders rise and fall with a breath. Then maybe that's where the conversation should go next, he says. Instead of asking people not to speak, maybe we ask more people to listen. The audience reacts louder now, mixed clapping and murmurs. Sunny looks at him steadily. Listening goes both ways. Chris nods once firmly. Agreed. Whoopi looks at the camera. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to keep talking, because clearly this hit something real. The music swells as the camera pulls back, Chris sitting still, hands clasped tight now, eyes forward, the tension hanging in the air as the audience buzzes with quiet conversation. The camera comes back up, applause a little scattered, not as loud as before. Whoopi waits for it to settle, glancing down the table before looking straight ahead. All right, she says measured. We're back. And clearly, this conversation struck a nerve both here and at home. Chris shifts in his chair, rolling his shoulders once like he's loosening tension. He gives a small nod, but his jaw is still set. Whoopi turns toward him. Chris, I want to give you space to finish what you were saying before the break. Chris inhales. Yeah, thanks. He looks at Sunny, then briefly at the audience. What I was trying to say is, I don't believe conversations about mental health should only belong to people who are suffering the most visibly or the least resourced. Pain isn't a competition. Sunny folds her hands together. I agree with that in theory. Chris looks back at her. Not just in theory. In practice. Because the minute we start ranking whose pain is acceptable to talk about, we discourage honesty across the board. A low murmur ripples through the audience. Alyssa leans in slightly. But can I jump in here? Because I think Sunny's point isn't about silencing you. It's about proportionality. Chris turns to her. How so? She continues. When someone with your platform speaks, it dominates the conversation. Media focuses on your burnout, your balance, your struggle, and it can crowd out stories of people who don't get invited on shows like this. Chris nods slowly. That's fair. But that's also not something I control. Sunny jumps back in. But you do control how you contextualize it. Chris's eyebrows lift. I do. And I try to. But context doesn't always survive headlines. Joy lets out a short laugh. Ain't that the truth? Chris glances at her, appreciative for a split second, then looks back at Sunny. When I talk about slowing down, I'm not saying everyone should or can do the same. I'm saying I reached a breaking point. Sunny's voice stays calm but firm. And I'm asking whether you feel an obligation to go further than that. To actively acknowledge the gap between your experience and that of your audience. Chris leans forward now, elbows lightly on his knees. I do acknowledge it, but I won't apologize for being honest about my life. A woman in the audience claps loudly. A few others join. Sunny looks out at the audience, then back at Chris. No one asked for an apology. Chris responds quickly. Then what are you asking for? There's a brief silence. Sunny takes a breath. I'm asking whether celebrities sometimes confuse vulnerability with accountability. The tension spikes again. Chris straightens, eyes narrowing slightly, not angry but guarded. I don't think vulnerability replaces accountability, he says. I think it opens the door to it. Sarah raises a hand gently. Can I say something as someone who's had panic attacks on live TV? Chris turns toward her. She continues. When I talked about my anxiety, I got messages from people who were struggling way worse than I was. Not saying, you don't deserve to talk, but saying, thank you for saying it out loud. Chris nods. Exactly. Sunny listens, lips pressed together, then responds. And that matters. But there's also backlash. People who feel unseen. Chris exhales. There will always be someone who feels unseen. Sunny's eyes sharpen. That doesn't mean we stop trying to see them. Chris's voice tightens. I'm not stopping. Whoopi raises her hand slightly. Okay. Let's slow this down. She looks directly at Sunny. Do you feel like Chris hasn't done enough? Sunny hesitates. I feel like the industry hasn't. And he's part of that industry. Chris reacts immediately. I don't represent the entire industry. Sunny meets his gaze. But you benefit from it. Chris nods once. I know. The audience reacts again, a mix of applause and murmurs. Joy leans forward. But Sunny, if we start holding individuals responsible for fixing systemic problems, where does that end? Sunny turns to Joy. It starts with awareness. Chris interjects, voice firmer now. And awareness doesn't come from silence. Sunny looks back at him. It comes from balance. Chris lets out a small, humorless chuckle. Balance is subjective. Alyssa jumps in. But power isn't. Chris looks at her. Neither is humanity. The audience audibly reacts to that. Whoopi sighs, rubbing her hands together. This is why these conversations are hard. Chris leans back again, crossing his arms briefly before catching himself and uncrossing them, placing his hands flat on his thighs. I want to be clear, he says. I'm not here pretending I have it harder than anyone else. I never have. Sunny nods. But do you see why people hear it that way? Chris pauses. I see why some do. Sunny presses. And does that change how you talk about it? Chris looks down for a moment, then back up. It makes me more careful, but it doesn't make me quiet. A man in the audience calls out. Good. Whoopi raises an eyebrow. All right, sir, inside voice. Laughter breaks some of the tension. Sunny smiles faintly, then returns to her point. Chris, you're thoughtful. I don't doubt that. But I think sometimes celebrities underestimate how their words land. Chris nods. And sometimes critics underestimate how heavy it is to carry everyone else's expectations. The audience reacts strongly to that, louder applause this time. Sunny tilts her head. But isn't that part of choosing fame? Chris answers without hesitation. Fame doesn't come with a manual. Joy laughs. Or an HR department. Chris smiles briefly, then grows serious again. I didn't choose fame knowing it would involve dissecting my mental health on daytime television. Sunny responds. But you chose to talk about it publicly. Chris's voice rises just a notch. Because silence almost broke me. The room goes quiet. Whoopi looks at him carefully. That's important. Sunny doesn't interrupt this time. Chris continues slower. If talking about it helps one person feel less alone, then it's worth the discomfort of being misunderstood. A woman in the audience wipes her eyes. Sunny finally speaks, softer now. And if it makes someone else feel dismissed? Chris looks at her. Then I hope they hear me say this. Your struggle matters too. The audience applauds, longer this time. Sunny nods, absorbing that. That's all I wanted to hear. Chris blinks. Then maybe we weren't as far apart as it felt. Sunny offers a small smile. Maybe not. Whoopi exhales dramatically. See? Growth. Joy claps lightly. On a Tuesday morning, laughter ripples through the room, easing the tension just a bit, though the undercurrent remains. Whoopi looks at the camera. We've got more with Chris after this, including audience questions. Don't go anywhere. The applause rises again, steadier now, as Chris sits back, face calmer but eyes still alert, clearly aware the conversation isn't over yet. The applause fades as the camera settles back on the table. Whoopi looks toward the audience seating, then back to the panel. All right, she says. We said we'd open this up, so let's hear from you. A production assistant hands a microphone to a woman in the front row. She looks nervous but determined. Hi, she says. My name's Angela. Chris, I just want to say thank you for talking about mental health. I'm a nurse, I work 12-hour shifts, and hearing someone say burnout is real made me feel less weak. The audience applauds. Chris leans forward immediately. Thank you for what you do. Truly. Sunny watches closely as he speaks. Angela continues. But I also understand what Sunny's saying. Sometimes it feels like celebrities get sympathy we don't. Chris nods. That's fair. Sunny turns to Angela. Thank you for saying both. The mic moves to a man a few rows back. I'm Marcus, he says. And honestly, I think we over-police what people say. If someone's being honest, let them be. Loud applause breaks out. Joy claps enthusiastically. Marcus for president. Sunny lifts a hand. Can I respond to that? Whoopi gestures. Go ahead. Sunny turns toward the audience. I'm not policing honesty. I'm questioning power dynamics. Chris shifts again, tension creeping back into his posture. And I'm not dismissing that, he says. But I think sometimes power is assumed just because someone's visible. Sunny responds quickly. Visibility is power. Chris counters. Visibility is also exposure. The audience reacts with a mix of hum, and claps. Sarah leans in. Can I ask you something, Chris? Did you hesitate before talking publicly about your health? Chris doesn't hesitate to answer. Yes. A lot. Sunny watches his face closely. I worried about being judged, he continues. About being told I had no right to feel overwhelmed. Sunny nods slowly. And now that it's happening, does it feel like your fear was justified? Chris lets out a breath. A little, yeah. A beat passes. Sunny says, I want to be clear about something. She turns to him fully. This isn't about denying you empathy. Chris looks at her. Then help me understand what it is about. Sunny speaks carefully now. It's about how empathy gets distributed. Who gets believed, who gets supported, and who gets ignored. Chris's expression tightens again. I can't control that. Sunny responds, you can influence it. Chris leans back, eyes narrowing slightly. By doing what exactly? The room quiets. Sunny answers, by consistently naming your privilege when you speak. Chris reacts visibly. He straightens, shoulders squared. I do that, he says, a little sharper than before. And I'm doing it right now. Sunny doesn't back down. Sometimes once isn't enough. A low murmur runs through the audience. Whoopi jumps in quickly. Okay. Let's not turn this into a checklist. Chris exhales through his nose. Thank you. Sunny looks at Whoopi, then back at Chris. I'm not asking for a checklist. I'm asking for awareness that doesn't stop when the camera turns off. Chris meets her gaze. You think mine does? Sunny pauses. I think it can. The tension spikes again. Chris clenches his jaw, then relaxes it. That's an assumption, he says. Sunny replies calmly. It's a concern. Alyssa interjects. I think what Sunny's pointing to is pattern, not intent. Chris turns toward her. But patterns are made of individual moments. Alyssa nods. Exactly. The audience reacts with confused laughter and applause. Chris rubs his hands together, then speaks more slowly. I don't want to be the example people use to dismiss others. That's never been my goal. Sunny softens slightly. Then say that. Chris looks at her. I just did. The audience claps. Sunny gives a small smile. Good. Whoopi looks relieved. Progress. Joy chuckles. I'm exhausted. Laughter ripples through the studio. Whoopi looks back to the audience. Next question. A younger woman stands. I'm Jess. And I just want to ask, Chris, do you regret talking about your mental health publicly? Chris pauses longer this time. He looks down, then back up. No, he says quietly. But days like today remind me why I was scared to. Sunny nods. That honesty matters. Chris looks at her, surprised by the tone shift. She continues. But discomfort isn't always a bad thing. Chris responds. It just depends who's carrying it. The audience reacts again, louder this time. Whoopi raises her eyebrows. Oof. Sarah laughs nervously. He's not wrong. Sunny tilts her head. But you're carrying it right now. Chris meets her gaze. So are you. A ripple of reaction sweeps through the audience. Sunny smiles, a real one this time. Fair. The tension eases slightly, but it's still there, humming under the surface. Whoopi looks at the clock. All right, we've got time for one more. A man near the aisle speaks. I just want to say, this is the most real conversation I've seen on this show in a while. Applause fills the room. Whoopi nods. I'll take that. Chris smiles faintly, then looks back at Sunny. For what it's worth, I respect where you're coming from. Sunny responds immediately. And I respect that you stayed in the conversation. They hold eye contact for a moment longer than usual for daytime TV. Whoopi breaks it. All right, we're going to wrap this up after the break. The applause rises again as the camera pulls back, Chris leaning into his chair, hands clasped, expression thoughtful but tight, knowing the hardest part of the conversation might still be ahead. The camera comes back for the final segment, applause softer but steady, the kind that signals the audience knows they've witnessed something heavier than the usual daytime chatter. Whoopi waits a second longer than usual before speaking. All right, she says. We're going to try to land this plane. Chris lets out a small breath through his nose, nodding once. He looks tired now, not physically, but emotionally alert, like someone who's been bracing for impact and isn't sure if it's over yet. Whoopi turns to him. Chris, before we wrap, I want to ask you something simple. How are you feeling right now? Chris blinks, clearly not expecting the question. He thinks for a moment. Honestly, he says, a little tense, but glad I stayed. The audience applauds. Sunny watches him closely, then speaks. That matters. Chris looks at her. It does. Joy leans back in her chair. I mean, look, not every conversation has to end with everyone holding hands, but at least nobody flipped a table. Laughter breaks through the room, easing the weight just a little. Chris smiles faintly. I considered it. Joy points at him. Thor's strength. Respect. More laughter. Whoopi smiles but brings it back. Sunny, do you feel like you got what you needed to say out today? Sunny nods slowly. I do. And I want to say something clearly. She turns fully toward Chris. This wasn't about attacking you. It was about challenging a larger pattern. And I appreciate that you didn't shut down. Chris listens, shoulders lowering just a bit. I didn't feel attacked, he says. I felt challenged. There's a difference. Sunny smiles slightly. That's good to hear. Sarah jumps in. And this is why live TV matters. You can't edit this kind of conversation. Alyssa nods. People at home are probably arguing with us right now. Whoopi looks straight into the camera. Oh, I guarantee they are. The audience laughs knowingly. Chris chuckles, then grows serious again. I just want to say one last thing. Whoopi gestures. Go ahead. Chris takes a breath. If anything I said today came across as dismissive, that wasn't my intention. But intention doesn't erase impact. So I'm listening. I'm learning. And I'm still going to be honest. The audience applauds, longer this time. Sunny nods. That's accountability. Chris meets her eyes. And this is dialogue. There's a quiet beat where neither speaks. Whoopi breaks it gently. All right. That's how grown folks talk. Joy claps. Write that down. As the applause fades, Whoopi wraps up. Chris Hemsworth, everyone. The audience cheers as Chris stands, waving, giving a quick nod to each of the hosts. As he exits the stage, the camera catches him exhaling deeply, shoulders dropping as he disappears backstage. The show cuts to commercial. What viewers don't see on air is Chris pausing just off stage, rubbing his face with both hands, then laughing quietly to himself like someone releasing pressure. A producer pats him on the shoulder. He nods, appreciative, but says nothing. Back at the table, the hosts are still talking, mics lowered. That got real, Sarah murmurs. Sunny nods. It needed to. Joy shrugs. Twitter's gonna have a field day. Whoopi smirks. Twitter always does. And she's right. Within minutes of the episode ending, clips flood social media. One moment in particular, Chris saying, "Silence almost broke me," starts trending. Supporters praise his vulnerability, calling the conversation raw, necessary, and long overdue. Others side with Sunny, applauding her for asking the uncomfortable questions and holding celebrity narratives accountable. Some accuse Chris of deflecting. Others accuse Sunny of pushing too hard. Comment sections fill with long threads, personal stories, heated debates. Hashtags trend. Short clips rack up millions of views. Reaction videos pop up by the hour. Even fellow celebrities weigh in. Some commend Chris for staying composed under pressure. Others praise Sunny for refusing to soften her stance. A few say nothing at all, letting the conversation speak for itself. By evening, headlines read less like gossip and more like analysis. A rare moment of real tension on daytime TV. Chris Hemsworth faces tough questions live. Sunny Hostin sparks necessary debate. Chris posts once that night. Just a simple message. Grateful for honest conversation today. Listening matters. No emojis. No hashtags. Sunny responds with a repost and a short caption of her own. Dialogue isn't conflict. It's growth. The comments keep rolling in. The next day, the show opens with a brief acknowledgement. Whoopi addresses it plainly. Yesterday's conversation struck a chord. That's what happens when people stop performing and start talking. The audience applauds. Chris doesn't come back on the show. He doesn't need to. The moment already lives on, and viewers are still debating it. Some say he handled it well. Others say he should have pushed back harder. Some think Sunny crossed a line. Others think she didn't go far enough. And that's the point. Because real talk show moments don't resolve neatly. They linger. They divide. They force people to sit with discomfort. And now we want to hear from you. What did you think about Chris Hemsworth's tense exchange on the show? Did Sunny ask the right questions, or did she push too far? Was Chris honest, or did he miss the mark? Share your opinion in the comments. And make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories you won't see anywhere else.